Guys, thanks for listening to this show. I want to welcome Zach as our newest patron of this podcast. If you want to support podcasts like this, or this one specifically, to see that it keeps on marching on with the support of people like you, you can go to patreon.com/PWNAPOD. That's PWNAPOD. All right, well, what's up, friends? Here with my brother Jared, and we are going to talk just a little bit about depression. Specifically, kind of for me, the last month has been not the best. I've put out a couple of depression journals out there, and so you guys have been somewhat caught up. We actually, my brother and I, also talked to a Bad Christian Spin Zone listener who happens to be a psychiatrist, and I thought the timing of him reaching out to me was timely. How about that? The timely.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, we have a good conversation with him, and let you guys know, some upcoming stuff on this podcast too. We've got a special interview with someone who was a part of Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're not going to stop talking about music too. We had Matt Johnson from a band that my brother and I know all too well, Roadside Monument, but I know for a lot of you, you have no idea who that band is, but just one of, I'd say...
Got to fix that.
Yeah, you got to fix that. But my brother and I go into our top 50 bands, and we tackle number 41 through 50. So some fun stuff coming out on here. But I've been thinking recently, and I wanted to talk to Jared about this, is just the nature of these depression journals. So I started doing them, maybe a couple of years ago, which I was actually in a lot better place mentally. Like, I kind of had some dips, but for the most part was in a good place. But when those dips happened, I was able to journal. I was able to write some stuff down, like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and I wonder what that means. And it would bring out some questions about how the brain works. It would, be almost like some confessional time for things that I struggle with. But then I'd kind of come right back out of it, and I'd be able to, for the most part, record a quick little episode and be done with it. And all of that started, honestly, because I don't think there's enough of that stuff being done. It seems as if that a lot of, I know for a fact that a lot of leaders of any organizations, but pastors, there's a lot of people that struggle with mental illness, and there's not a whole lot of people talking about it. And so I just felt like, well, I'm not going to be that dude. It's not super comfortable, but I'm not going to be the guy that is as quiet about it. So that's kind of how it all started. And in the last year or so, it kind of ran out of material. Felt pretty good. Like there wasn't
a good thing, right?
Yeah, heck yeah, running out of material. So not as many ups and downs. So it kind of fizzled out. And then recently, like in the last month, I had a pretty significant crash, and mental crash, didn't get in a car wreck. And, I'll just be totally transparent that, even at this point right now, I was borderline thinking about not doing this episode just because I didn't feel like I was in the right place, or I just didn't feel up to it. But the first two depression journals that you'll see on this podcast feed, basically they were recorded at a time in which I was at least at a place where I could talk about it. I mean, the low parts of the depression and the sadness and all that. I mean, there's just no way I'm going to put a microphone in front of my face and start talking about it. But I just started thinking about it, and I was just like, is this even a good thing? So, I mean, one thing obviously is my ego, and I do think that there's a part of me that's just like, I don't want to share this sort of thing. I don't want the world to know just how significant and how big of a dip this would be. I mean, I would call it more of like a crash. So I want to throw that completely away because I don't like that being a reason. But then I was thinking, you know, there's it kind of happens so fast, and with how my mind works, I'm like, oh, I'm really struggling with depression. I guess I got to get back on my depression journal stuff when it's able to click and when I'm able to do that, which means that there's people that I would say are relatively close friends of mine that are hearing that sort of thing for the first time, and not from me. Now, a part of that, though, is it's a lot easier because I'm not embarrassed about my mental condition. It's a lot easier for me to not totally embarrassed. There's obviously some human part of that, but putting a microphone in front of my face and speaking to an empty room, knowing that people are going to listen to it later, requires a lot less energy than calling a close friend of mine, like Ben Huntington, for instance, and just say, hey, man, you're a good friend of mine, really been going through a hard time, just wanted to talk, or at least, you know, catch you up to speed, and that sort of thing. So I kind of was thinking about it along those lines. And then lastly, is it even healthy? You know what I'm saying? Like, is this something that, is this a time where I should just be keeping my mouth shut and staying off of podcasting? But I just thought it would be interesting to turn that on you, Jared, because you're, I'd say, you know, easily top 10 people on this earth that love me the most, cares about me the most, and you know, you're editing this stuff, and obviously these don't require any sort of edits, but you're listening to them and you're just throwing it out there, you know, for public listen. Does that seem normal to you, and just kind of what are your thoughts in general?
Well, my definition of normal and your definition of normal are probably pretty different, considering the stuff that you wrote in your book.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're a very public person. I'm a very private person. So when you say things like, I'm going to throw the reason of my privacy out the window for a good reason to not do these, I'm like, why? I think that's a very valid point. I mean, like I said, I really respect the private parts of my life, and if I want to confide with my wife or a best friend or a brother, I'm going to do that, but not with strangers. So there's no shame, I think, in you wanting to keep certain things to yourself. So that would be my first thing. My second thing would be, given that you are very used to, you know, revealing the most, you know, intimate things of your life to thousands of people, I think if it helps you, if it's some sort of therapeutic way to sort of sort through your thoughts, that's definitely a win, because I think not only is that helping you, it's also going to help listeners who are also struggling with depression. Okay, so I think so in a situation where it's definitely benefiting you, then you know it's going to benefit others. So I think that if you're cool with it and it kind of helps you sort your thoughts, then I say go for it. But at the same time, if it's something you want to keep to yourself, there's absolutely no shame in being private about things. Yeah. You know, that's just my opinion. There's things that I will be private with and maybe share with one or two people that are very close, but not to thousands of people. You know what I'm saying? So that's just where you and I differ, I guess.
Yeah. And I think, too, I have to watch out for this stupid pastoral, I have a responsibility complex also, because I think I start to think along those lines of, you know, it is, I mean, I've had so many situations where my public discourse of my depression has been super helpful for people. I mean, you know, to the point where people have said, man, now I have the strength to talk about it. But it's not my responsibility to try to be helping everybody, especially in a season where I'm hurting. So I think I need to be careful of that as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's like that. This is like the thing when you ride on an airplane, they tell you that, if the oxygen masks come down, take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Don't try to give oxygen to people around you until you've, had enough oxygen yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to help others. So I think first and foremost is going to be your own, your own comfort levels and your own health.
Yeah.
That should trump everything else.
Yeah. So I think what I have, I think what I'm going to do is probably like I have one more of these journals that I have managed to record on kind of during a good hour. So I'll probably throw that up, after our conversation here.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that I was living with mom and dad for
Yep.
a little stint.
Yep.
It's funny too because some close friends, word got around, and they weren't coming right out and saying it, but in conversation, I could tell that obviously the easy implication is that Priscilla and I are not on good terms, whether she's like, F your depression, I can't take this anymore, or, I've lost my cool with her because of it. But it really was a collaborative decision based on the fact that it's an easier place for me to rest, especially given that I think a lot of the things that I battle is irrational guilt stuff as a father, which I guess made me fight going to my parents even harder. I was like, no, I have to be here, where my kids are. But at the same time, knowing what was best for my health. But then the flip side of that too is there were times when, I felt so emotionally paralyzed where it was pretty scary for Priscilla, causing her to have some anxiety. And the last thing we need is for her to start lacking sleep and to start fretting and getting to a frail place emotionally as well. So it was actually something, we worked out with mom and dad. But I thought you'd get a kick out of this. There was, one time, dad, he's got a heart of gold, always willing to be there, talk or whatever. But his profession's definitely not like a psychologist or someone to talk through stuff. But very, very comforting person. And he actually said, he was like, Joey said, I can't tell you that I have all the right things to say or anything like that. He said, but man, you can talk to me. And he actually said, remember, you did show me your penis that time.
Nice.
I thought that was pretty cool. I think he's still just baffled that that I actually put that out as public information, as I'm sure
I'm baffled. I'm
too.
baffled. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My goodness, man.
But yeah, so we go ahead.
I was going to say, being in your old childhood home, that's got to help too, I would think, because you have so many positive, excellent experiences, pre-depression, growing up in a loving household. I think that has to be something to it too, to sort of help you in this really tough time. Just that psychological environment, I guess, maybe.
Interestingly enough, there were some psychological things. And like I slept in the room that used to be yours, and I kind of imagined the the closet open.
Yeah. With like Nintendo and stuff in there?
Yeah.
Or? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely, man. That's what I'm talking about. I think those are the kind of things that would really make this a positive experience for you, at least not as negative as it could be. Just drawing on those memories, drawing on the environment, and all those years of growing up in that household.
Well, and I think too, those things are like they're like a simple reminder of what life is really about too. Because
Sure.
I mean, honestly, like right now, you and I are with our wives, we're responsible for families. We need to make an income. If something important in the house breaks, we need to make sure it gets fixed. But in the grand scheme of things, life isn't that much different if you just think of human existence, and if you think of the 15,000 generations of people that have lived and died, and then you think of adding 50 years to me and your lives, and we're out of here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So when you think about it in that context, and there were times when I would sit out in the backyard and just think about all the soccer playing, all the basketball playing, and just growing up. So yeah, interestingly enough, I think you nailed it. I think there was definitely some psychological comfort, and then you've got a super nurturing mom obviously, but I tell you what, man, it is a dark place just not to be able to find enjoyment in like even a movie. Like it would feel so good to be like, okay, I'm going to give my, here I am away from my family. There is some comfort into that because, nobody is needing me right now. But man, it would be nice to enjoy my World War II book or to watch a movie, and it's like I choose just to lay there instead. Yeah. I mean, it's just...
That's a dark spot, man, for sure. I mean, I've been there, but very rarely in my life, thankfully. So I can, I know how bad it is for sure. It's not a good place to be.
Yeah. Do you like? I mean, I think you're like you said, you're more of a private person. I mean, I think I even just between the two of us, I probably go places conversationally that we probably wouldn't go there if it wasn't for me. I don't know. But like how on your side of things, given that you're not experiencing this struggle, but you have like a little brother that is, like, I don't know, how do you process that? Like, are you able to, just kind of easily put things in perspective and be like, there's pain in this world, this sucks, Joe is going to get through this? Or is it something that maybe nags at you a little bit, like, wish you could fix, or, like what goes on in your head?
So I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, the fact that you are loved by mom and dad and you're with mom and dad and you have a loving wife that's super supportive, to me, that makes it easier being so far away. Like, I know you're in super good hands. Yeah. And I know even if I was there, I really probably couldn't contribute too much to it, because when you're that depressed and you're that dark of a spot, words really don't do too much for you. At least they haven't done much for me when I was really depressed. Yeah. So I would just be noise. I mean, loving noise for sure, but I don't know how helpful I would be. So when I realize all of that, and I realize I'm pretty powerless to do anything for you, then I have to let that rational thought take control. Otherwise, I would be miserable.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because I would be so frustrated that I couldn't be there to help you and blah, blah, blah. But knowing that in reality I wouldn't be able to help you anyway. So from that perspective, I'm able to be okay, but still very nagging in how much I know you're going through. And basically just the gravity of the situation definitely nags at me on a daily basis. So basically it's a mixture of the two things that you said. Number one, it is fairly easy from a rational standpoint because I know you're in great hands, but at the same time there is kind of an existential angst that I deal with every day, knowing just how bad off you are.
Yeah,
I know I'm powerless to do anything, so I don't feel guilty about not helping you, but at the same time it's definitely that empathy, that brother empathy, or just fellow human empathy, knowing how dark of a spot you're in and just kind of like being there, I guess spiritually with you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And honestly, it almost, I don't know, for me it's almost a weird thing that we even talked through the depression journal thing, but honestly, I was talking to a really good friend, Scott, and I think he actually mentioned that's kind of how he found out how serious it was. And that's when the light bulb went off, and I was just like, is that something that I should even be doing? And I started, writing down some thoughts, and I was like, we'll have a little conversation with Jared about it, but we'll go ahead and air the third one, and then I'm just going to decide to lay off of it until the waters are a little more calm and a little more steady and consistent, and it will be more of a reflecting on a season instead of being, in the middle of the season, waiting for, quick little times of, fresh air, for a split second. So after the final installment of the depression journal for right now, we're going to let you guys in on a conversation Jared and I had with a psychiatrist. I'm going to just stick with his first name, Ara. Dr. Ara, his last name's just a little too much for me right now, but great guy. One thing that I really respected about him is I think a lot of people, they want to come onto a podcast and have a bunch of zingers and have a bunch of, here's what I believe, here's why it's so awesome and unique, and here's why it's a grand slam, here's why everybody needs to know this. And I don't think you can really do that in his field. I think a lot of people probably try to have a facade where, they truly believe that they do have that sort of concrete, here's how things work. But I mean, when it comes to the brain and chemicals working in the brain and hereditary stuff, nutritional things, I mean, it just doesn't seem like something that you can take and throw out, a bunch of things, calling them facts. So I really respected the fact that he basically kept himself from doing that. I thought that it showed a lot of honesty on his part. Jared, I mean, what's your opinion on, I think all doctors kind of have a leaning as far as how much they lean into therapy, how much they lean into medication, how much they lean into nutrition and, meditation and all that kind of stuff. Like, how did you feel about his approach, what we gathered in 45 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am very attracted to the idea that when necessary or when possible, try to treat problems from a dietary/biological way. I love the idea of, healing through food. However, I just don't think, and I don't think he would argue this way either, I don't think that's going to be the right fit for everybody, like you said. So I think that, we are very complex beings. We're just body, soul, and spirit. So I think really, and especially in a situation with psychiatry and depression and things like that, you really need to sort of take care of all three components, body, soul, and spirit. And so when I think you've tried so much, I think during these last 3 or 4 months with diet, with exercise, with therapy, you gave it your all. You gave it everything you had, and it just wasn't working out for you. So I think that's when you can introduce, the medication.
Yeah. Yep.
So I definitely think that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to show where people who have battled severe depression were completely cured through diet. But again, that can't be applied to everyone, I don't think. I don't think we're there yet.
I mean, it's interesting. Like there's a temptation to just eat meat and just see like what. I mean, Priscilla would kill me at this point if I got off medication. Sure. To try to do that. But
and that's one thing too.
I wonder if just eating meat while I'm doing what I'm doing. I mean, I don't know.
But if it were me, I think I probably would try that. Definitely stay on the medication for sure. And stay on it for the next 6 months, 8 months, whatever. And if you were ever wanting to go off the meds again, definitely taper. Like that. So I'm on social anxiety medication, and I was on a very high dosage. This is for your audience. I know you already know all this stuff, but I was on a very high dosage for 2 or 3 years. But then I wanted to try to get off of it. So over the past 8 or 9 months, I've halved it, and I think I'm going to go the next step. But I knew, I really thought that if I tried to do it all at once, it wouldn't work out for me. So my advice to you would be, if you ever did want to try this again, definitely do the slower taper approach and find that sweet spot. Maybe you'll never be fully off your meds, but if you can half the dosage, that would be half the side effects, and you still maintain, a balance, I think. So I would just have really small goals and just baby step it if you ever wanted to try this again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being there for me for sure. And
absolutely.
So like I said, the rest of the episode, we'll do one more of these for good or bad, for better or for worse. However, we'll play this last depression journal. Then you'll hear from Dr. Ara. And I say next week, why don't we air that episode of the intern from Elevation Church? Jared, you've already edited that. You're planning on trying to tune into that church online, right? Isn't that the new church?
Oh my gosh, that was a very, very entertaining episode, but also a very scary episode for sure.
See, that's what's crazy is you're totally outside of church culture, totally.
Yes.
So that stuff for you was probably like reading in an Enquirer magazine and the grocery store.
Yeah. Dude, I was getting
flashbacks. That's just commonplace, man.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I keep thinking about like Jim Jones and the People's Temple, like in Guyana, that mass suicide drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, this is like 2019 America.
I know, but how unbelievable is it that he's able to pull it off?
Yeah.
By using the gospel. I've got so many mixed feelings.
But you said yourself, though, I guarantee it's because of his charisma and his ability to speak well.
Right.
Which is what you said. Yeah.
Right. And I think he thinks he's doing it relatively the right way. I don't think that he sees it as off as we do. But that will be for next week.
Yeah.
Oh, you disagree? You think he's a conniving, like?
I don't know how you can be that. Yeah, I don't know how you can be that delusional. Like, yeah. I personally don't see it, but I don't want to judge. I don't know the guy. It's just I find it very hard to believe that his intentions are good, given what I heard in that podcast.
Yeah. All right, Sven Zone signing off. What's up, everybody? Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't really like talking about this. I know that it sounds like I do because I put it out on a podcast, but I'd say this kind of falls more into a conviction area for me than anything, because I struggle with mental illness, and I have come to grips recently with the fact that with how bad it's gotten recently, it's embarrassing. It's humiliating. It actually hurts when I hurt other people. It's a little tricky, talking to coworkers about it. And I will say this, that the times when I do come on here and share what's going on in my life, it's certainly times in which I have just kind of that window of mental opportunity, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, in times in which I am at my lowest point, there's no way in heck that I'm going to plug a microphone in and start talking. So I kind of take advantage of the times when the clouds aren't too thick. But I did want to start this journal entry off by saying I don't really enjoy this or like it, but I also feel that there's too little of this. I've also experienced very often even pastors reaching out to me, and this definitely sounds like me patting myself on the back. Maybe it is to stroke an ego. I don't know. I don't think so. If anything, it's just more of a driving force as to why I need to keep doing this. And that is, people reaching out and saying, man, thanks so much for being so open with what you're going through, because now I feel like I can be a little more open as well. And for the love of everything holy, my gosh, if if pastors and people that are at least viewed as people on the top, which that's not my view, but lots of people view pastors, on the same level of presidents and, heads of big corporations and stuff like that. I kind of see myself more as I've got a responsibility to lead a church, and people are looking at me for leadership, but I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with folks. In fact, just 2 nights ago, my wife and I spent time with peers of ours. These peers would call me and Priscilla pastors, but we actually leaned on them, shed tears with them, and shared what was going on in our lives and got their insight and input and love. And, and I even told them, I said, look, thank you for being in a church that I technically pastor and being willing to pastor me. And basically, I said, not everybody wants that. There's certain people that would bail if they thought that part of their responsibility was to actually help their pastor, because there's certain people that want pastors to be on that pedestal and to be the hero, and certainly not someone to be helped. And so I gave my deepest appreciation to them for that. And quite frankly, if anybody wants to be a part of the congregation that I'm leading or have been deemed pastor of, and they want that sort of person that keeps their mistakes to themselves and keeps their flaws and their weaknesses to themselves, and do not reach out to other people in the congregation for help and support and emotional stability, I have no problem with saying that the church that I'm a part of is probably not one that you want to be a part of. And so that's just kind of my take on that. I did just want to explain how I don't get like this big jolt of energy and excitement to come on here and share this stuff, but I do it because I feel strongly that I should. So I will continue where we left off last time, and Priscilla was in New York City and basically coming back on a Saturday. And that Saturday, the burden the depression and anxiety had been alleviated just a little bit, was able to function a little bit. I remember taking the kids to a birthday party and still feeling bad. Kind of ironically, my wife had a mishap with her cell phone, and so I'm trying to help her track her cell phone in New York City from the Find Your Phone app, here in Charleston, South Carolina. So that was a major added stress that kind of, I guess, forced me to get out of my head and into, helping her with what she was doing. But the next day, being Sunday, can be a very, very dreadful day for someone in my mental state. Just the, constant, hi, how are you doing? Good to see you. And just kind of having somewhat of a game face. In fact, it's actually pretty encouraging, the people that are close enough to me to actually see through that facade and actually ask, hey, I can tell something's not right, and it may not be the time or place right then and there to discuss it, but it is encouraging. And I've told this story many times, but it's just worth sharing again how a sweet friend of mine came up to me one time and said, hey, that you're here for us, and I just want to make sure that you know that we're here for you as well. And this was coming off of this was like a week after a pastor in our community had committed suicide, and I just felt like that was such a sweet gesture for her to take my hand and basically say, we would never want you to feel like you couldn't talk to us, and definitely confirms my personal conviction that I don't ever want to be in a place where I can't talk to people that see me, as pastor. But this story gets kind of funny, I guess you could say. The Sunday, the grind of setting up in a mobile campus, and just all the things that have to do with pastoring a church and all of that. It was just so heavy with the depression and the anxiety. We had just found out that we potentially were going to lose about 70% of our storage space. So that was an extra dose of anxiety. And I literally felt like I was at a breaking point. And then I look on my phone, and my wife hadn't showed up to church yet. I figured that she was going to catch up on some sleep, get the kids up, and come to the second service. Well, I notice on her phone, she says that the kids have lice. And we've been through this before. I guess this is just for reputation's sake, just FYI, lice like very clean hair. So we're not a super dirty family, but lice go after clean hair. Well, when I got that text, I also know that my wife literally, and she would tell you the same thing, becomes a complete basket case when it comes to that, like literally almost loses her mind. Just the fact that there's bugs in our kids' hair, potentially in her hair, definitely not in my hair. But the thorough process of going through every strand of hair and getting every single knit out. I mean, she literally, it was probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon to about 9 o'clock in the afternoon, that process. And when I got that news, our children's director saw me in the hall, and I was basically going into the classroom, which I had brought one of my kids to church, my youngest son, and I was like, well, daggum, I got to get him out because he probably has lice, and sure as hell can't have him in there amongst the other kids. So that's what I did, is I went to get him. But as I was crossing paths with our children's director, I mean, I just fell apart. And thank God she is a good friend, and so it wasn't something, obviously it was minimally alarming to her, but it wasn't something that she couldn't handle. And I just said, look, I need to get Waylon out of the classroom. She says, everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's relatively okay. But here I was with already the embedded anxiety in my natural heart of hearts, on top of all the stresses of the stuff at church that my mind was magnifying, on top of the depression, and then on top of the prospect of coming home to a very unrestful, chaotic, my wife is losing her mind sort of environment. It really took its toll, to the point where I had a baptism scheduled after those services. And I literally was thinking to myself, I cannot handle this. Like, I cannot handle, I've got to figure a way out of this. And so I'll be honest, I started, and, probably some of the folks that go to this church, you'll be hearing this for the first time on this podcast, but in my heart of hearts, I was strategizing, how can I get out of this? And I called Priscilla and I said, well, look, my my anxiety is causing my stomach to be turning into knots and, potentially inducing some not so fun trips to the restroom. I said, maybe I can just say, look, I've got bad stomach problems. I've got to bow out of this baptism. I'm sure everybody else can, handle this. It can go without me. And I think deep down inside, I knew it was something that I needed to grit my teeth and move forward in. And I think my wife was a good sound of reason as far as encouraging me to do the same, because if she would have heard in my voice and recognized kind of a posture of inability, I'm pretty sure that she would have discouraged me from doing that. So, basically the following, so fast forward a week, a very bad week of kind of the same old. It was after church again, and I literally found myself, so I had not gotten much sleep at all the prior Saturday night, even up until this point. Here we are, I think it's July the 9th, and, I'm talking early July right now, but so for the last week and a half or so, my pattern has basically been I'll go right to sleep, but then I'll wake up at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then wake up every 45 minutes, and then eventually 4:30 or 5 o'clock hits, and I'm just wide awake, and I'm just completely miserable because my only escape of depression and anxiety is sleep, and I can't even get one more 30 minutes time slot of escaping that. I just have to lay there and exist. And so this particular Sunday, the Sunday after the lice Sunday, I basically was so excited to be able to climb back in bed and not to necessarily even escape the world. Like I'm actually trying not to do that, because I don't think that is the healthiest approach. I think that the best thing for me at this point is to keep engaged and to try to do the things that I'm normally doing. But in this case, it really was, man, I need to catch up on some rest. And I literally sat there and I felt like a time bomb that was just about to completely just blow up. And I really did not know what to do. I called my wife and I said, look, I don't know what's going on, but I don't know what to do with this. And I hate making those statements to my wife, because I know that those sorts of things are very scary and very alarming, and I'm kind of putting it in her court like, hey, I don't know what to do, so I'm asking you to tell me what to do. And that's obviously not necessarily a fair position to put her in, but obviously open communication is a, pretty decent thing. And so, we tried doing something that I was pretty much anti. So the last time, that week, the prior week, between Lice Sunday and Sunday of trying to get sleep after church, I had gotten back on medication. So I was back on medication, and the doctor even offered, he said, hey, while you're trying to get back on your feet, do you want to try Clozapine, I think is what it's called, or Xanax or something like that? And from what I understood of the potential addictiveness of those, I just said, nah, I don't want to mess with that kind of stuff. I just want to, get back on some stable antidepressants and give that a whirl. Well, on that Sunday, where I really did not know what I was going to do, and I can't explain it. it's not suicidal. I didn't feel like I was going to kill myself, but it literally felt like I was just about to explode. So maybe you could call it like an accidental explosion suicide, like where your just body explodes or something. I don't know. Another way that I can liken it to is, for people who have had kidney stones, the pain is so severe, and it just doesn't matter which way you position your body. It doesn't matter whether you lay on your left side, your right side, lay on your back, whatever you do, that pain is just there. And it kind of feels like that sort of an emotional, like, no matter what I do, this thing is there and it's just wreaking havoc. So I guess basically illegally, we knew of a friend that struggled with anxiety, and my wife said, look, you've got to try taking one of these clozapines. And basically that is what I did. It did offer a little bit of a relief there. Won't go into too many more details at this point because I want to wrap this up. But just to give you, I guess, some sobering details so everybody can feel so sorry for me. Like I think it was that day I literally just laid down on the ground and just sobbed, and my wife laid down on the ground next to me, just as my partner in life, and I just didn't know what else to do, but to just lay there on the ground face down and just sob my eyes out. And I don't know if there was some relief there. I guess how the body works, that's kind of a natural way of getting some stuff out. But my mom, precious mom, ended up showing up that night, and with really gonna get emotional, with tears in her eyes. She just said, I don't even know if you want me here, but I've just got to be here. I've got to be here with you. And you know what? There's nothing like a mom's unconditional love, and just that presence being there. So she spent a few hours with me that Sunday evening with my wife and and I think over the course of a few hours, I started feeling a little more sane. But yeah, we'll leave it off here. So I guess in this journal, we are basically ending at about 1, 2, 3. We're ending early July, in which my mom came over to offer some emotional support, and that's where we will stop. So again, this isn't fun. This isn't something that I'm trying to do for podcast numbers. It really is something that I feel like, hey, if this is something that I go through, like my good buddy Toby Morrell says, I only got one life to live, and it's certainly not hurting people to hear this. And if you are listening to this and it does hurt you, that potential this guy Joey that you look at in life as having his stuff together, and you're a little bit disappointed that he doesn't, then there's actually something that you need to be looking at yourself. But for the 99.9% of everyone else, I hope it brings you just a hint of encouragement to know that, as it says in, I think, one of Peter's epistles, if I'm not mistaken, that there are people all over the world going through similar things. that you're going through. And I know that brings me some peace as well. So signing off, and you guys have a good one. All right, so we are here with Ara, and I'm going to give that last name a whirl. I didn't ask him what his last name, I see his last name, but I didn't ask for his pronunciation beforehand, so I'm going to give it a stab and make a fool of myself. It's Ara Darakjiian.
Oh, yeah, you got it.
No way. Darakjiian?
Yeah, totally.
Nice. Yeah, beginner's luck, for sure. Well, Ara reached out to me. I think it was a combination of, first of all, Ara is a BC clubber, has been following Bad Christian for a while, and so has heard a lot of my laments of mental illness, and then more recently, some of my exploration with the keto diet and that sort of thing. He actually reached out and kind of attaboy, pat on the back, introduced himself, and it was, I was very appreciative of it. And I thought to myself, man, with some of the things that he's studying and some of the stuff that I know that interests my brother Jared over here, that our listeners are always happy to hear from every now and then. Because you used to be on the show every single time and people miss you.
That's true.
Because you used to be on the show every single time and people miss you.
That's true. Yes, a
miss
bygone era. Yeah.
So I figured, man, this would be a good time for the three of us to get together. But what I want to do first is just kind of take a general approach. Ara, there's like so much of a natural outcry these days. I mean, for example, and I think a lot of people would see this more in an outlier, but then there's some people that would be pissed off to even hear me say, the dangers of vaccines being something that, only certain people way out there think. But my personal belief is that vaccines is progression and, nothing that should be avoided. But you have a similar sort of vibe with antidepressants. You've got people that say, well, first of all, they're limited in their effectiveness. You've got the bad side effects. You've got other more healthy alternatives. And then the big one is that we know that there's a lot of doctors like Ara who truly care. I'm just looking into those eyes and I can tell you're a caring man. But there is, the corruption of people just wanting to make a buttload of money off of medicine. I mean, that's just a given. So the big question that I have for Ara is, in your opinion, your professional opinion, before you answer this question, go ahead and give your credentials. But are there any clear-cut cases in which antidepressants are clearly the best option for people and maybe the only option?
Wow, that was a great build-up.
That was a great introduction. No, don't say long. Say great. Say superb introduction.
That was an amazing introduction to that question. And so I almost want to comment on your question first, because yes, it's interesting because with vaccines, with diet, with antidepressants, there are these kind of conflicting things floating around everywhere. And I think there was the most recent article on vaccines and the anti-vax movement was saying how a lot of Americans are losing trust in the institutions. And I think that really the core of it, in the sense that this medical research has, for the last 30 to 50 years, is what is driving a lot of medical opinions. This is how we are trained in medical school, and this is the truth, so called, that we're given, and we as doctors look at the data, we look at papers, we read the papers, and they say, here's the evidence, and we say, yeah, okay, so what we're doing is evidence-based. And the problem comes when the papers can be influenced by industry. And so a lot of the times, this is what
The
happened.
papers that you guys are evaluating, is what you're saying?
Yeah, the papers, the medical knowledge. So this is what happened with nutrition when fat was, I'm going to go to the keto route for a second, when fat was blamed for cardiovascular illness, years and years in the 60s, instead of sugar and carbs. And we kind of see the same things in terms of antidepressants. With the vaccines, it's kind of a different thing. I haven't personally read original papers on the vaccines. And my opinion is to kind of go with the medical establishment right now. The people that are against vaccines, some of them are against them for good reasons, and some of them are against them for bad reasons. And so I personally like to take a stance where I am open to people's experiences. Experience is a type of way of knowing something that is very important. Doctors often go to the evidence or the literature, and I think it's important to also be open to people's experiences. So, so getting back to it, antidepressants. For depression, antidepressants have a statistically significant effect compared to placebo that is small. And antidepressants are also, the way they were studied is that a lot of studies that were done ended up not being published. A lot of that data was not published. And studies looking at this unpublished data showed that more of the studies that went unpublished showed no effect compared to placebo. Now, there's other, and then the question, there's tons of questions about this, but the way that these studies are done is that people are grouped into diagnoses. And so depression is that type of diagnosis. And depression is a cluster of symptoms. I think the most accurate way to describe major depression would be to say that it's a syndrome. And that means it's a collection of symptoms, but we don't really know what causes it.
Yeah.
But once you fall under this category, then you can be part of these research trials, and you can be put in the antidepressant group or the placebo group. And so in a number of these trials, it was shown that the antidepressant groups had decreased symptoms compared to the placebo group, as found by certain questionnaires or interview methods.
But minimal difference?
So the difference, I think the difference is significant. Okay, this is what I want to say. That everybody tends to have decreased symptoms, whether they're in the placebo group or the antidepressant group.
Yeah.
And the antidepressant group is statistically significantly different from the placebo, but by about 2 points. So that's where there's some questions. Now, everybody in the study also improved.
2 points, like on a scale of
on a
10?
scale of maybe like 0 to 30 or 40.
Okay.
Like 0 to 30 or 40.
Okay.
Yes, the percentage attributable to the actual pill. Now, the placebo response is also quite large. So I think what that says more than anything is it says something about the quality of the studies.
Yeah.
And so my opinion is this data reliable? I'm not sure. Does that mean we can conclude that yes, antidepressants are good or no, antidepressants are bad? Not really. And then what it comes down to is the clinical experience of the psychiatrist, because psychiatrists are the ones that see the patients, and they see certain people benefit hugely from antidepressants. either for their panic attacks get eliminated or their depressive symptoms improve a lot. And when that happens, when a psychiatrist experiences that, then the studies kind of maybe take a back seat. But in the sense of how everything is done scientifically, that's kind of the backbone. And I don't see it as very reliable, but I'm not antidepressant because I've seen and experienced the effects on my patients, on a certain number of my patients. Now, the other thing is there are certain patients that antidepressants work very well for, and then there are other patients that they don't work very well for. And the percentage is in question as well. So one of the main trials found that about 50% of people improve on antidepressants, and then 50% remain treatment resistant. And so then the question becomes, why? And one answer that some people put forward is that, well, the diagnosis is wrong, or that there's an additional bipolar component, or there's some personality disorder. People put various theories forward as to why 50% do respond, 50% don't respond. I think is that depression has various causes. Some are biological, some are psychological, and I think these antidepressants that act on serotonin and possibly also norepinephrine may act on the biological components, which are more prominent in some people, and that's why some people get better and some people don't.
Yeah. So, like, for example, I'll use me as an example, and my brother can vouch for this. Is I've been on antidepressants, on and off, mostly on, really since 1999. I mean, so we're talking 99 up until this past March. And so there were a time when the combination of medicine that I was on kind of the effectiveness fizzled out, and it happened to correspond with a time of losing one of my closest friends. So I just kind of went off the deep end and then had to kind of seek a different type of medicine, and then that was able to build back up into some more stability. But this past March, and I've been putting some information out on this podcast about my journey. Went off medication, and dude, I mean, did everything that I could think of, from CBD oil to losing 30 pounds from dropping sugar, to therapy, to psychotherapy, talking to a therapist, to going through cognitive behavioral therapy workbooks, to really understand. I mean, just hitting it from every single angle. And dude, I went off the deep end. I mean, like I am currently at a really bad place, And so for me, at this juncture, I just can't see in my position like any other option other than, okay, well, I guess medication is something that I've got to look at. And then I look at other examples. I'll throw 3 examples. One being me and my brother's dad, who has, struggled with depression, since the, late 60s, and has basically been on antidepressants ever since. And, we've seen some of the ups and downs, and with him being medicated, it's usually been pretty good. Another situation my therapist told me about is one of her colleagues who has all the corrective sort of thinking stuff down pat, does wonderful therapy for people, knows how to help people, understands life, has a great perspective, but she's on a baseline SSRI because she knows that, that's just something that she needs. A pastor friend of mine, who has counseled me through a lot of stuff, has degrees in psychology, is a counseling master, a few years ago had a really hard time and needed to be on medication. So it's like those sorts of situations, I guess, for me, at the very least, maybe it's even to help my ego out a little bit, because I guess there's a part of me that says, you know what, I want to kick ass and take names and figure this stuff out and not need to be on medication, not have to deal with the side effects. And it's like I'm at a point now to where I guess that's just not in the cards for me. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that, Jared? In the cards for me. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that, Jared?
About your assessment of yourself?
Yeah, well, just about that just the whole thing in general about, medication. And I mean, because you and I have texted back and forth. You've been there for me as a friend.
Right.
You've been there encouraging me and everything. And, at one point you're just like, dude, it's not the end of the world to be back on medication, sort of thing.
I guess my opinion is, you look back in the past 20 years, and based on what I've seen, it seems like you've had more ups than downs being on the medication. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
You've led a pretty normal life. I mean, of course, you've been down sometimes, but for the most part, you've been sound professionally. You've been a great father, a great husband. And then now that you've been off the medication for 3 months, you're at a point to where you were debilitated for a little while. You couldn't really do anything. You can't really function. So to me, knowing what you did, knowing the mindset you had going into it, knowing all the things you went through, all the different supplements, your diet, all those approaches, and the fact that you're still at this point, seems to me that medicine is something you need to consider because of your past and the past successes you've had, being on it. So I agree with you. I think that there's no shame in that. You tried cold turkey being off the medication. It frankly didn't work for you.
So Ara, someone like me, like if I was your patient and I gave you kind of my spiel, is that the sort of and I'm not looking for any sort of justification. As far as I'm concerned, you can say, dude, there's other things you could possibly be doing to figure this out. But I mean, like, in your professional opinion, with the background that I've given you, am I one of those people that you would say, yeah, you actually would need to be on medication?
Yeah. Good question. I was, let me start with a little bit of humor that I'm on the pasture with no answers. And I was going to say, with some questions, I might end up being the psychiatrist with no answers. But
in good company.
But to answer the question, there's no way to know really who will respond to medication. There's no way to know who will need to stay on the medication for the rest of their lives. The best data that we have is if you have recurrent depression, then you should stay on it. My opinion is that circumstances can change. I think you also had OCD in the past, and you no longer have those symptoms.
I mean, I get the OCD stuff confused with the anxiety stuff, so I don't really know how to separate the two. But yeah, as a younger chap, I definitely had like full blown OCD rituals and things like that,
right,
that I don't really experience anymore.
Right.
But as far as like anxiety and troublesome thoughts that just keep being recycled in my brain and stuff, I mean, that's something that I'm struggle with currently.
Yeah. So you went off the medication and you had a relapse of symptoms after maybe 2 or 3 months. You have a therapist. You're going through therapy, and it sounds like it's a CBT type of therapy. So these are evidence-based treatments. Both of them are. And the question is, do you have to be on medication the rest of your life, or is there a point where you could come off? And I can sense that there was a certain pride of being off the medication and maybe a certain shame about having to go back on. And these, there's no answer. There's just no answer for figuring out what is the cause and what you have to do or what you need to do. In my opinion, there are different types of therapies, and certain people respond well to cognitive behavioral therapies. Other people respond well to different types of therapies that go more into the unconscious areas and kind of bring those to light. And when you can experience some things in the unconscious, that can make a big difference in your life. So I think there's two ways you can handle this. You could go back on the medication and continue the types of therapies that you've done in the past, which seem to work well for you. And so I think that's a solid thing, because you've experienced that in the past has worked well for you. And a lot of times our own experiences are the best things we can go off of. Or you can try a different type of therapy that might lead to a different experience for you, and that may or may not allow you to come off the medication.
So it really does sound like psychiatry, psychology, and all of that. It really is a trial and error sort of approach. I mean, because everybody's brains are different, and you just have, early on, I was trying so many different medications and getting off so many different medications to find the right one. It really does seem like let's try this one or let's try that one. Is that an accurate statement that it's a unique science in the sense that you're just basically just trying different things because everybody's different?
I think so. I think a lot of times there's minor differences in medications, and you can't do a randomized controlled trial on real life. You can change a medication and maybe you get better with one medication over the other, but maybe there was also a change in life circumstances that kind of led to that. Maybe you get side effects from one and you don't get side effects from the other, or maybe the side effects of one may help you sleep or something that there's a therapeutic component of a medication side effect. So there's just so many things that could be going on, and there's no standard. I think there's no standard in the psychotherapies or in psychiatry. There's no one way of looking at things. It's almost like, depending on who you go to, depending on their experience with one thing or another, they might recommend one thing. It's not a unified field in any way. So there's a lot of diversity of opinions out there. And I think it's also a relatively young field. It's only been around for maybe this past century. So all of these things kind of play into the complexity and make it difficult for other people to understand it looking in, and difficult for psychiatrists to say, this is who we are and this is what we do, and it's because of this and this and this. And so it makes things really complex.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, totally.
Is there any scientific evidence to support the idea of being in Joey's situation, but instead of going off cold turkey, kind of tapering down to find kind of a sweet spot that would, number one, help them stay stable?
Definitely, especially with people who have been on antidepressants for a long time, a very slow taper is the way to go. There are withdrawal effects from antidepressants. They hit some people harder than they hit others. And so a slow taper would be the best way to kind of do that. If it's scientifically proven or scientific, again, there's no studies about this, but there's, anecdotal experience that people who have been on antidepressants for a long time have a potential to have withdrawal. And Joey, I did listen to the last two kind of podcasts that you put up about your experience about being off of it for 3 months, and that's like pharmacologically, that means it's out of your system. Now, yes, that is true in a physical manner, but your brain receptors have kind of been altered, and just in the same way that it takes an antidepressant maybe 6 weeks to 4 to 8 weeks to start working or to see if it's going to make a difference. Even when the medication is out of your system, you might I think there's a chance that the withdrawal can be over a longer period of time. And there isn't really anything scientific about it, but I think it's more like you have to leave room for the possibility that that could occur. It's more like you have to leave room for the possibility that that could occur.
Yeah.
Some people get headaches, flu-like symptoms, like they feel tired, drowsy, low energy. Some people, I've heard some people describe brain zaps, like they get sudden like kind of jolts of pain to their head, but yeah, those are the common ones.
So you've actually you were saying how in an email that you worked with like some severe illnesses, schizophrenia, severe bipolar, psychosis, people from psychosis from chronic drug use, where medications are pretty much in order. Sometimes these people are locked up in facilities and will remain at a low function their whole lives. Like, explain what that looks like, man. I mean, so you're actually treating people that are like locked up pretty much because they can't function in regular society?
Yeah, so every psychiatrist is trained in to really help people with the whole range of mental illnesses. So, and schizophrenia is kind of a bread and butter type of thing. If you're working in a hospital, and then there's state hospitals, and then there's this whole system. I'm in California, so there's a whole kind of system. At the top, there's state hospitals for the most severe that are always going to have to remain locked up. They could be dangerous to society if they're not provided with food, clothing, and shelter. If they don't have a structured environment and people caring for them. And these people end up on the streets otherwise, or they end up doing drugs, or they end up dying in one way or another. After one level lower, there's what they call locked IMDs, and they have a little bit less support staff, and they're a little bit cheaper, but they still require for the patient to be locked. They get passes; they're able to go out into the community, but they have to come back. So it's a little bit more freedom than if you were in a state hospital. And then after that, there's like what's called an IMD step down, which is a similar facility but not locked. And then so they can graduate down from higher levels of care to lower ones if they do well, if they don't decompensate. And then eventually they might end up living in what they call a board and care. And obviously, if these people had families, then they could kind of maybe try to reintegrate into the home of their family. But a lot of times, these really severe mentally ill people don't have the socioeconomic means, or they don't have families that take care of them, so they end up in this system.
And is it kind of your responsibility to determine whether or not they can integrate back into like regular day?
Yeah, in part, but there's it's so bound up in the social with like the social aspect that administrators, social workers, everybody's involved. They have somebody from the government, can be a public guardian, so they can have a conservator that makes decisions for them about where they're to be placed or where they're to be, what medications they can take. And so these are people who have been determined to not be able to provide themselves with food, clothing, or shelter. We call that gravely disabled. And so they need to, basically somebody needs to be appointed to be responsible to make these decisions for them.
Yeah.
Appointed to be responsible to make these decisions for them.
Yeah.
When it comes to situations like that, is this something that occurs like throughout that person's life? They're symptomatic throughout their life, or is?
Yeah, most people with schizophrenia get it in their 20s. That's kind of the biggest. Some women get it later in life, and then bipolar, a lot of times it occurs a little bit later than schizophrenia. And these are the like the more severe illnesses that can be really debilitating. So you mentioned adult onset, or it could happen later in life. Is that what you said? You mentioned adult onset, or it could happen later in life. Is that what you said?
Well, no, my question was, do people who are institutionalized ultimately wind up institutionalized? Do they exhibit these symptoms like in their teens or childhood, or it's like I said, is it just happen?
Yeah, well, the first one, it kind of happens more suddenly. We refer to it as a psychotic break, and that can happen over weeks or months, but typically there's like a prodrome of somebody's like staying in their room and not coming out, or really being isolative, and then one day they're like, I'm not eating the food, it's poison. And so that's kind of an average psychotic break, how that might occur. And the first time they go to the hospital is referred to as like a first break psychosis. And there's some studies that show if that the sooner they start taking medication during this first break, and if they stay on it, then they won't decompensate further. But if they go a long time without starting to take medication, then they can actually, their baseline can lower even more, and they'll become less functional. Can lower even more, and they'll become less functional.
Wow. It blows my mind that you could have somebody who's, normal for the first 20 or.
Yeah.
Jared, the guy from, he talked about this on Bad Christian, but one of our favorite bands, Craig's brother, I mean, one of the guys in the band, I mean, just imagine your group of friends from college, and just pick one in your head right now, and imagine him, walking the streets of Philadelphia. You have no idea where he is, but you know that he's huddled up on a bench somewhere, trying to get food from it. That's somebody in their band, and they're just like, we don't know if he's alive. He's probably in the street somewhere trying to stay warm somewhere, and there's just nothing we can do. Just nothing. Ara, on the opposite end of the spectrum, do you think that there's a lot of people that are on medication that honestly they just don't need to be? They need to figure something else out? Like, are we an over-medicated society?
I think it depends. It depends on the individual. I've heard reports that in Britain, SSRIs are way overprescribed. I think overall, in a sense, some people could do without medication. I think the science of psychotherapy is also at a place where if psychotherapy were able to reach more people in a significant way, that would help as well. I think the field of therapy can improve as well.
Yeah.
But as far as if it's overprescribed, it's hard to say. I think that would have to be like on an individual basis to make that call.
Yeah.
Have you looked into? Go ahead, Joey.
No, go ahead.
Oh, have you looked into like nootropics at all, or adaptogens? Like,
I don't know too much about nootropics, or even there was like a psychedelic assisted therapy type of thing that was popular before, or not popular, but an area of interest before, and it's kind of become an area of interest again. And it's kind of microdosing, or like doing psychotherapy after somebody's taken mushrooms of some type. I don't know too much about that. I know there's a few institutions that, especially like, they are the ones researching it, but to my knowledge, there's nothing solid that's come out of that yet.
I mean, could you say the same thing about just antidepressants in general, as far as the solid stuff? Or right now science can definitely say, no, we've got solid data, in the field of antidepressants.
Yeah.
Or at least people are currently on such new medicines where there's not a whole there can't be a whole lot of evidence or data to support, long-term benefits or long-term adverse effects. I mean, a lot of this is just new trial and error. Like you said, it's a fairly new field, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what we can say is that antidepressants are very good for certain people. Now, like we said, 50% will remain treatment resistant after a few trials of a few different antidepressants. So, does that warrant that everybody with a depression diagnosis be put on an antidepressant? That's up to the individual, and that's kind of a conversation between the doctor and the patient.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that answered your question, or
Yeah.
if you could.
When do you, like, what are things that you look for before you pull the trigger with prescribing something to someone? Someone sits down in front of you, kind of gives them the background of where they're at, where they've been, how long the symptoms have persist, what they've done, whether or not they've done therapy. Like, what are some things that you look for before you say, hey, you know what, I think maybe prescribing something is a good idea for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really depends on what the patient wants. A lot of people come in with the idea that they want to take a medication, and other people come in saying, I don't like to take medication. I don't want to do that. And so I do my best to explain the risks and the benefits clearly, and not push them one way or another. But I kind of try to give information and make it their choice, because it really, at the end of the day, is their choice.
Yeah. All right. Well, tell us about some of this nutritional stuff. You mentioned Jordan Peterson and his daughter pretty much being complete carnivores, and how that's helped their mental state. It's something that has kind of revolutionized Jared's life, just as far as his physical well-being. And I don't want to speak for him, but I think his physical well-being, and I don't want to speak for him, I think even his...
Well, I'll just say real quick too, I just finished listening to a podcast. It's Dr. Sean Baker and Zach Miller, who's like a ultra marathoner, and they had a guy on there who's had suffered from major depression for like 25 years, and he tried all these medications to varying degrees of success, but finally he heard about Jordan Peterson, and he decided to go carnivore. And after, I think, 2 months, all of his depression symptoms were gone, absolutely gone. And so I don't think that's something that can be universal for everyone, but I do think there's definitely some merit.
Yeah, I think this is an exciting area of study, because I think it can shed light on what I was talking about before, that there's so many possible mechanisms that can produce the symptoms of depression. And for some people, diet or nutrition may be one of them. And this has been seen from a population level, that people with diabetes or insulin resistance have higher incidence of depression. So there's definitely something there, that there's a link between insulin resistance and the tendency for people to get depressed. Now, during my residency, I did a type of research that was also kind of amateurish, but I did a questionnaire-based study on the Reddit group, the Keto Reddit group. Now, the Keto Reddit group, and I did it about a year ago, at the time they had 500,000 subscribers. At this point, I think they're up to 1.4 million. So, so it's been growing quickly. And my study, which was very, it's hard to do science, and it can be expensive. And the reason for that is there's so many different ways for things to be biased. And my study was admittedly biased, but I think it really shows that there's something there. But I basically administered questions that were similar to depression screening scales, and the people that had done keto had like they reported like 50% improvements in energy, like 30% improvements in mood, like 35% improvements in anxiety, and there was like a mean weight loss of uh, like 15 pounds. And I think a large portion of them also did intermittent fasting. But like these were some real impressive results. Now you can't really hang your hat on it because it's uncontrolled, and like I said, the study is very prone to bias. But it's enough for me to say there are certain people that will really benefit from doing this, and um, so I encourage people, especially people with insulin resistance, whether that be in the form of obesity or diabetes, to give the keto diet a shot. Give the keto diet a shot.
Yeah, I'll say for me personally, anecdotally, I've been seeing a psychiatrist since 2009. Once every 6 weeks for social anxiety. I'm on fluvoxamine. I was on a very high dose for a long time. It definitely helped, but since I've been on the keto diet, I've really tried to kind of wean myself off of it, taper a little bit, and so I've basically chopped my dosage in half, and I'm supplementing with CBD and ashwagandha. But I told my doctor the last time I was there that I've never felt better in my entire life. So that's at half the dose. I think the diet really is pretty powerful, honestly. And of course, that's
Yeah,
not scientific. That's purely anecdotal. Some of it could
yeah,
be placebo, but I just know that the medicine definitely helped.
yeah. I actually started it because I think Matt Carter was talking to um, was it Aaron Sprinkle or somebody with diabetes on Break It Down, and I was driving home from work, and I was gonna go to In and Out anyway. I know it's a California phenomenon, but I was like, you know what? Instead of my usual like double double with fries, I'm gonna do a 3 by 3 protein style. And that night I started it, and I kind of continued it. And I think that first weekend I was like close to manic. Like I just had so much energy. I didn't really get a keto flu. Obviously, that energy kind of went down over time, but like I think for me, I was always kind of a low energy, sleepy person, and the keto diet helped in that aspect a lot as well for me. And the keto diet helped in that aspect a lot as well for me.
Have you noticed any improvement in your cognitive functioning,
Yeah,
like
I
clearer
think,
thoughts?
yeah, definitely. There are still times where I feel kind of tired and drowsy during the day. Um, I was also on taking melatonin a while for my sleep, and when I stopped that, I was sleeping less, but I actually had more energy during the day. So I think that was also another biological factor in terms of my energy that was an important switch. Um, but yeah, definitely the keto diet was a part of the puzzle in terms of me.
So you still
Yeah.
a keto dude?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, is that something that you think is probably also falls into the category of person to person? Like for some people, that probably wouldn't be a good solution.
Yes, yes. So there's um, there's a couple of other psychiatrists right now interested in keto. And you guys can find the keto community on Twitter. Everybody is retweeting each other. Everybody's like excited, passionate. There's some doctors, there's some lay people, there's some of everybody, bodybuilders and so on, and they're all on Twitter and they're always talking and sending articles and all that. So, but there's one psychiatrist, Georgia Eid, who I think her website is diagnosisdiet.com. And she also talks about her personal story of having a lot of a newly diagnosed inflammatory condition in her 40s or 50s, something like diagnosed as fibromyalgia. And then when she went low carb, a lot of her symptoms went away, and but she still had some. So when she went carnivore, all of her symptoms went away, and she's kind of a very strong carnivore proponent now, and she writes articles for Psychology Today, and she gives a lot of science. If you want to read science, you can read her, and she gives a lot of the technical stuff about like all these different nutrients found in animals versus plants, and like the bioavailability of protein in animals versus plants, and she can get like really into the details about that type of thing. About that type of thing.
What's
But
her last
even
name?
her Ede, Ede. So there's a lot of kind of basic science there to be dissected, but even she said on a podcast recently that she has she recommends this to every patient that she sees, and she's known for her nutritional psychiatry, so people come to her for this. But she has, from in her experience, it has worked for some people, but not for everyone. So there's definitely individual differences there too.
Is behind the scenes is science? I mean, we all know that some crazy stuff is right around the corner with genetic engineering and people's lifespans being 200, 300 years, all that kind of stuff. Like, is there some stuff going on behind the scenes where you think medicine's going to be so advanced that there'll be pills where people will be able to take that just zaps depression, zero side effects? I mean, like, it's obviously people are working towards more effective medication that don't have all the baggage and stuff. I mean, do we see some of that stuff kind of being right around the corner? Are we still a century out, or what's your thoughts on that? Your guess?
Yeah. I think medicine is good at certain things right now. Emergency care, antibiotics for infections. What we're not so good at is with chronic disease, diabetes, obesity, chronic mental disease across the spectrum, whether it's depression, anxiety, or schizophrenia, bipolar. And I think there's going to be a lot of advances in cancer treatments. I think that's definitely one area where we're going to see a lot of advancements. In terms of mental illness, I think that maybe for schizophrenia and bipolar, we might start to see more advanced genetic treatments not in the immediate future, but maybe in the more distant future. Those are real hard biologic problems. And then I think OCD is also it has more of a biological basis in comparison to depression and anxiety. And I think with depression and anxiety, I think a lot of it is going to be better therapy is what's going to drive that field forward. Psychiatry, before the DSM, when everybody was psychoanalytic, they used to think of psychiatric disorders as one of three things: neurosis, psychosis, or borderline. And the psychotics were the people that we now describe as schizophrenic, and then obviously people with bipolar, they seem to have psychosis, but in like an episodic way. So that's kind of how that was broken down. And then on the side of neurosis, there were people with anxiety, there were people with depression and obsessive compulsive disorder and other personality disorders. And then in between there was the borderline, which kind of had nowadays there's borderline personality disorder, which is kind of a redefinition of what it used to mean. Which was this place between psychosis and neurosis.
That Russell Crowe Beautiful Mind stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, he was full-blown psychotic for sure.
That's right.
But
no, we're talking Split. M. Night Shyamalan, is that how you say his name? Like that guy Split. He's the borderline personality guy.
I don't know if I've seen that or if I'm familiar with that. But borderline personality now, there's like there's like a criteria where they have a history of self-harm. A lot of them have a history of some type of abuse. They have tumultuous relationships, fear of rejection. There's just a bunch of criteria, and they may have like what they call like micropsychosis. Like every once in a while they might hear something, or they'll have a delusion about something, but it's neither full-blown schizophrenia nor like kind of your anxious neurotic. So I guess my point being, I think on the neurosis side, therapy is kind of the first line in my opinion. And then if that's not working, then we need to think about more biological causes. I think nutrition is something that will take more of a role, because I think that's one thing that has changed in the last 30 years is that we're eating so much more processed food, a lot of more sugar, a lot of processed carbohydrate. And that's different from, what our ancestors did, hunting animals in the wild.
Yeah.
And I try to think like, did cavemen get depressed? Like, did people get depressed like thousands of years ago? Like, what is like, where does depression come from, or where does anxiety come from? And it just makes more sense to me that this is not like a biological thing that's like written in your genetics, but that it's something that has been given is a result of early life experiences. And more psychiatrists are saying this these days, that these are things that come about as a result of early life experiences. And I think that's why I see that as a more root cause and I see psychotherapy as addressing the root cause more than medication. While medication can definitely help with the symptoms, and I think I'm not knocking medication in any way, but I think if we're going to think about root cause, which is kind of the way to think if you want to cure something rather than to treat something, then you have to think about the early life experiences that influence someone's psychology. And if there's a way to modulate that, or to change that, or to re-experience that, then that's theoretically going to be the way to go for a cure. Going to be the way to go for a cure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for sure believe that my social anxiety can be traced back to early childhood stuff. I think I said that on a Bad Christian podcast. I think Matt was asking me about where I think my social anxiety came from, and I really believe it was certain monumental experience.
Well, Ara, this has been awesome, man. It's been good having you on here, and a BC clubber yourself on the Spin Zone, hanging out with me and Jared. I appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely, my pleasure.